Hey everybody, Andrew Fantasia here. Happy January and welcome to another review marathon. Well, I say another as if it's a bad thing. I love these. They're the most fun I've ever had doing YouTube stuff. I hope you all know the rules by now. If this is your first time, welcome. Here's how these work. Every 3 months, I give myself a challenge to watch as many movies as I possibly can. However, the two rules are, number one, they have to be movies I've never seen before. And number two, on the day that I watch the movie, it has to have been at least a year old, preferably more. So, with that being said, this is our 12th time doing this. And this time it was a smaller amount because the holidays made everything busy, but I managed to squeak in 25 films I had never yet seen. Hey people, Andrew from the future here, just coming in to correct something because I foolishly thought that I watched 25 films for this list, but I actually watched 26. I just forgot to include one of them. So every time I say 25 in the rest of this video, just ignore it. Don't listen to me. In fact, we're going to watch the rest of this in correcto vision to make sure you all understand what a mistake-filled man I was. And I'm going to throw in the movie where it falls in the list. So no harm, no foul, but just remember for the rest of this period of time, 25 equals 26. Okay. Back to the rest of it. But I managed to squeak in 25 films I had never yet seen for our 12th review marathon, and I'm really excited to get into them and talk about them as fast as possible. Before I do, though, if you like a good story, because films are, at the end of the day, great stories, why don't you check out this great story? At least I think it's a great story. I'm a little bit biased. This is my novel, my fantasy story, We Were Wizards, and it's available right now on Amazon. If you are a fantasy fan, you owe it to yourself to read this, man. It's good old-fashioned classic adventure fantasy. There's wizards, there's possibly a dragon or two, there's magic stones. This is the first book. The next book in the series is this one, and they're also available on Amazon right now. You can get We Were Wizards in paperback, in hardcover, and in ebook. So much fun. You got to check these out. Seriously, you'd be doing yourself a favor, you'd be doing me a favor, you'd be doing the fantasy world at large a favor. So get those on Amazon right now. But in the meantime, we are going to scurry on over to our review of the 25 movies that I have never seen before and talk about them as fast as we can. Ready? Here we go. After Sun. 2022's After Sun is a minimalist European art film, which means it's not for everybody while simultaneously winning every award ever. It tells the story of the last time a divorced father ever sees his daughter, and for the most part it does so beautifully. The director decided to take a key moment in the story, split it up into little chunks, and intersperse it throughout the film, which is fine. Except that moment takes place at a rave with rapidly blinking strobe lights. Apparently, no one ever told this director that such a thing is incredibly unpleasant to look at. Other than that, though, After Sun is great. All Hallows Eve. Damien Leone's first full-length movie is a mixed bag, literally. It's a direct-to-video anthology film with a couple of his earlier short films weaved into a new bit of connective tissue involving a babysitter on Halloween night, which is a cliche I will never get tired of. It was fine? Look, Art the Clown is the reason to watch All Hallows Eve, full stop. I haven't seen the Terrifier movies yet, but this solidified my desire to do so because Art is a frightening and delightful new addition to the pantheon of slasher icons. Seeing him here in his earliest incarnations is worth the price of admission. Apart from that, All Hallows Eve just feels like the prototype of something better to come. Armageddon Time. Squeaking in under the wire at just over a year old, Armageddon Time is director James Gray's loose autobiography about his first-hand experience with the class struggle growing up in New York in the late 70s and early 80s. For a coming-of-age tale, it's very bleak, with an unhappy ending that leaves its protagonist severely disillusioned with the world at large. But at least it shines a spotlight on an important issue. The preppy, rich, extremely white school our hero goes to displays capitalist grooming at its most noxious. And one scene where all of the kids at said school start chanting, "Reagan, Reagan," is downright chilling. Bad Influence. James Spader is a yuppie, but he's also a decent human being, and we all know those are oil and water, so he befriends a mysterious rebel played by Rob Lowe, and surprise, Lowe turns out to be pure evil, and he sends Spader's whole life on a harrowing downward spiral of lies, hedonism, and outright homicide. A body gets buried in the La Brea tar pits, Lowe eats cookies and milk as evilly as possible, and Spader's apartment has more glass blocks than you can shake a necktie at. Good stuff. The Bat. Brace yourselves here because I think we may have discovered one of the first slasher films, like ever. This hit the multiplexes in 1959 and tells a skillful whodunit story with a whole lot of genuine thrills and suspense. This is the kind of movie where a character finds a secret passage behind a fireplace. If that sort of thing gives you the same warm fuzzies it gives me, then you're in for a good time. And the killer has such a cool look. I want an action figure of this guy. The Bat is great, a wonderful piece of classic horror that I want to add to my collection ASAP. The Bedroom Window. Uh-oh, Steve Guttenberg is sleeping with his boss's wife. Double uh-oh, she witnesses an assault while she's at his apartment, but she can't testify because it would give away their affair. So triple uh-oh, Steve offers to testify on her behalf even though he didn't see a damn thing. The Bedroom Window could almost be a farce, and depending on how you look at it, it is. And it feels like the plot of every dog-eared, yellow-paged paperback you've ever purchased at a drugstore, but it's also pretty entertaining. Here's a fun drinking game. Take a shot every time Gutenberg's character makes a stupid decision. Dirty Harry. I find it almost impossible to root for Clint Eastwood because, spoilers, I don't like the guy very much, and he still wasn't very likable as grizzled cop Harry Callahan, but to my delight, Dirty Harry ended up being a pleasure to watch. There's nothing like a hard-boiled 70s police story, and in a decade that gave us the glorious car chase of the French Connection, it's easy to overlook just how great Dirty Harry's foot chase is, as Harry races across town on an exhausting trek from payphone to payphone in the hopes of saving a hostage who's been buried alive. It's gripping stuff. Also, the villain is horrifying. I like this a bunch. Friday the 13th, the 2009 remake. Movies are like houses. Old ones are warmer and cozier and full of life and color. New ones are ridiculously expensive, muted, and devoid of personality. Whenever a modern remake of a classic horror happens, you can bet it'll follow that same metric. See the increasingly more lifeless, less colorful retreads of Black Christmas. So I was a little bit surprised when I kept hearing people say good things about the 21st century reboot of Jason Tiberius Voorhees. I'm not sure that's his middle name, but try to prove me wrong. So I finally enrolled in this new version of Camp Crystal Lake, and yeah, it ain't half bad. It could be better, but it's not terrible. It definitely manages to squeeze key elements of Fridays 1 through 4 into one movie like a greatest hits album. I wouldn't go out of my way to see it again, but it ain't half bad. His Girl Friday. I didn't know what I was getting into here. If I had, maybe I would have liked this better. But the two main characters are just a couple of assholes who keep treating all of the nice people like dirt. On top of that, director Howard Hawks wanted to break the record for fastest dialogue in a motion picture, and boy did he succeed. So what you get here is 90 minutes of two jerks talking non-stop at like 15 words per second, and it's headache-inducing. Again, I might have enjoyed it more if I'd known what I was in for. But as it stands, His Girl Friday should have been called His Girl Monday because it's unpleasant and I don't care for it. The Hound of the Baskervilles, both the 1939 and 1959 versions. There are over a dozen TV and film adaptations of this most seminal of Sherlock stories, but I wanted to see these two because they represent two of the most classic eras of Hollywood. The 30s version stars Basil Rathbone, who, to me, is the go-to Sherlock Holmes actor. The 50s version was made by the awesome British horror studio Hammer and stars two of their most popular actors, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Cushing also plays a great Holmes, but for me, nothing tops Rathbone. Both of these adaptations are fine, but neither of them really capture the spooky, Halloween-y feeling that the original Hound of Baskerville's story managed to convey on paper. And both films made different, baffling changes to the source material that didn't really end up being all that necessary. Both are competently made, but to the shock of absolutely no one, the book is better. Insomnia. I was sick when I watched this and incredibly tired, so I guess I was in the perfect mindset. One of the few corners of the Christopher Nolan pool in which I hadn't yet dipped my toes, Insomnia does a fine job of making itself more than just another grizzled cop tries to catch a killer story. However, this is an American remake of a European film, and you know what that means. It means despite the wide-eyed Al Pacino hoo-ah of it all, this is still the less risky, watered-down version. One day I'll check out European Insomnia and cement that. On a side note, European Insomnia would also be a great title for a film. Invisible Ghost. Bela Lugosi plays the nicest guy in the world who also happens to go into a trance and start murdering people every time he sees his wife. Yeah, it's complicated and weird, and there's no real mystery to it because you know it's Bela doing the killings straight away. No explanation for his murder trances is ever given either, so it all kind of feels immaterial at the end of the day. Jason Goes to Hell. Even though I love this franchise, it's taken me a long time to get around to seeing its final few entries, and maybe it was for the best because Jason Goes to Hell is caca. Don't get me wrong, it's the most delightfully batshit, ridiculously fun caca that only this particular era could deliver, but I imagine being a Friday fan when this came out, going into a theater and expecting to see A, Jason, and B, Jason visiting hell at some point, And you get neither of those things. Sure, Jason makes a scant few appearances, but most of the movie is just a bunch of random townies walking around possessing one another with evil demon slugs. Like, what the hell is even happening here? No thank you. Jason X. So at some point after the events of Jason Goes to Hell, Mr. Voorhees was captured, experimented on, and then cryogenically frozen. Now he gets to wake up over 4 centuries later and start wreaking havoc on a spaceship like a zombie xenomorph. And it's better than Part 9, I suppose. There's a robot who kicks butt, and David Cronenberg gets a cameo, and Jason goes full-on titanium Super Saiyan at one point, so I guess there's fun to be had here. The movie is 100% a comedy with a slasher in it. Any attempts to be genuinely scary have gone out the window, or out the airlock, as it were. But it could be worse, and the ending, to my utter surprise, actually does a pretty good job of leaving the door open for sequels that aren't sci-fi. Like, it full-on gives the next movie a chance to go back to the series' roots if it wants to. That's quite an accomplishment for a movie called Jason X. Leon the Professional. Director Luc Besson is an odd man, and his tendency to get romantically involved with underage girls is more than a little disquieting. But some of his movies have been absolute bangers, and while I wouldn't say Leon the Professional is the best of them, it's still stylish and interesting enough to be worth a watch. Though when I found out that Jean Reno, the most French actor on planet Earth, was supposed to be playing an Italian guy in this, I did a full-on snort laugh. There's supposedly an extended cut that focuses more on the most interesting aspect of the story, in my opinion, namely Leon teaching 12-year-old Matilda how to become an assassin like him. And hey, I'd be down for a legacy sequel led by Natalie Portman called Matilda the Professional. Let's just put it in the hands of a different director, okay? The Muppet Christmas Carol. I love the Muppets, and I absolutely adore A Christmas Carol. So you'd imagine this would be a match made in heaven for me. And you'd imagine correctly. I never get tired of seeing the story of Ebenezer Scrooge play out, and Michael Caine does a perfectly splendid job of bringing him to life here. I think the only downside was that none of the songs really hit hard for me. But who cares? I was way too busy admiring the technical achievement of Muppetry that Jim Henson brought to every single thing he touched. Night of the Creeps. This has been in probably like my top 5 most eager to see films for years now, and I think it's everything I ever dreamed it would be. It's a beautiful hodgepodge of 80s zombie horror mixed with 70s detective thriller and a dash of 50s sci-fi schlock for an ultimate campy stew. Plus, it's got Tom Atkins aplenty. Night of the Creeps thrilled me, and if you understand the double meaning of that sentence, then you probably love Night of the Creeps too. On Dangerous Ground. I'm torn when it comes to this. On one hand, it's a very touching story about a cop who lacks compassion and finds it in the unlikeliest of places when his next assignment puts him in contact with a devastated farmer and a kind-hearted blind woman. On the other, it's a film noir that takes place almost entirely in the country. And I don't know, to me, noir goes hand in hand with a big city. That just feels right. Setting a noir in a snowy farmland is a creative choice, but it feels akin to setting a Halloween film in April. On Dangerous Ground hit all of the right emotional notes, though, so I guess I dig it. Popcorn. Movies about people who like movies are usually either terrific or the most obnoxious things ever made, and Popcorn is terrific. It starts off like a heartwarming high school comedy before morphing into an absolutely bananas slasher. It's so much fun. The performances are great, especially the killer, who I won't spoil here. Best of all, it pays tribute to the history of horror cinema, up to and including all the old Movie Palace midnight spook shows with their interactive gimmicks. I could watch this 97 more times. Shattered. What started out looking like a cheap, sleazy thriller ended up becoming a pretty terrific little murder mystery with twists galore that threw me for a loop. And Bob Hoskins is doing his Eddie Valiant / Super Mario voice, which is probably one of the most comforting voices in all of cinema. If you get a chance to see Shattered, don't look up anything beforehand. The surprises here are half the fun. Single White Female. Hollywood just doesn't do thrillers anymore, and they certainly don't do them like Single White Female. Edgy, R-rated, no punches pulled, and an acting tour de force by Jennifer Jason Leigh that's so good I can't believe she didn't spend the rest of the decade being a AAA movie star. It doesn't quite hit the heights of something like Fatal Attraction, but it gets close enough to rub elbows with it. I was on pins and needles the whole time, and hey, that's Frank from Succession! Lorette Party. I would pay to be a fly on the wall during the writing and auditioning processes of Lorette Party. Because folks, this is another hidden gem. A golden turd, one we can prop up on the same shelf next to The Room or Birdemic. If you have a Prime Video subscription, go watch this post-haste and get ready to snort laugh. I can't believe this thing got made with actual money. So I Married an Axe Murderer. I think the main thing I learned from this movie is that Mike Myers' comedy comes with an expiry date. If you experience it when it's brand new, it'll be delicious and you'll love it forever. But if you try to go back to it after the fact, you'll be wrinkling your nose the whole time and it'll just leave a sour taste in your mouth. I'm seeing this 30 years later, so you do the math. It's just Myers making funny faces and telling cheap public domain jokes for 90 minutes. I do like this premise though, and it's a shame something more substantial wasn't done with it. Also, why did we stop using crazy descriptive titles like these? So I married an axe murderer, my stepmother is an alien, I was a teenage Terminator. Where did these great movie titles go? Are they okay? Spirited Away. The amount of color and creativity that goes into a Miyazaki film is just astonishing. Like, it really serves as a sobering reminder of just how bland and safe most Western films are. I'm not sure yet if I like Spirited Away more than Howl's Moving Castle, but it still wrapped me up in a visually stunning world that I wanted to spend hours and hours exploring. Also, Japanese spirits are the stuff of nightmares, and I'm glad I didn't watch this as a little kid, or I'd be explaining a lot of things to a therapist right now. Terrifier. With All Hallows Eve in the rearview mirror, I decided it was time to check out the next evolution, and thus I found myself in the filthiest abandoned warehouse I have ever seen in a motion picture. Terrifier may not look pretty, but is a damn good slasher flick with an instantly iconic villain and a whole lot of twists and turns. Nothing about this plot, thin as it is predictable, and Art the Clown continues to be slasher gold. So far, so good. And that's 25. That's it for Review Marathon number 12. Lots of good stuff in this one. A lot of movies that I, finished and I was like, you know what? That's great. And one day I want to hopefully add them to my collection if space and money are willing. So if we tally up the numbers of all of the films from all the review marathons of this calendar year, what is the grand total? Well, let's take a look back. Last year, I had a whopping 156 films. I was really trying to get a big number last year. This year I was a bit more casual about it, and it showed because the number is significantly lower. In fact, it's the lowest we've had so far, but it's still a nice, juicy, even number. It is 110. That is the grand total in the year 2023. I got to see 110 movies I'd never seen before, thanks to the review marathons. It's over 100, so I'm happy. I think if it was under 100, if it was like a 2-digit number, then I'd be like, that's a bummer, but hey, 110 could be worse. But that was another fun round of our quarterly review marathon. I'll see you for number 13 in a few months, but even sooner, I will see you for the Fanny Awards, which are around the corner. That's right, it's a new year, so it's a new awards season. Time to talk about the best and brightest, and sometimes not so brightest, of 2023. That's coming soon. Until then, I hope you guys have an excellent day. Stay awesome, stay wonderful, stay healthy, and above all, adios.